There's an interesting parallel to this idea of leaving clues for yourself, because if you've written a journal, I think it's kind of cool if you find old writing from yourself and you look back and it's something that you've written, 6 years ago, and you look at what you write and you're like, who is this person? You kind of remember, and it can rekindle the oh, I remember at that time I was going through this, and oh wow, this is how I wrote, I guess, or how I thought. And it's such a strange thing to find notes from yourself. I think that's why it's so great to keep an actual journal. I don't believe in keeping online journals. I don't know if people are doing that. I think maybe they would, because they write, you just write online now. But I've been writing, like I write by hand in journals. And I mean, when do you start looking randomly through old files on your computer? But you will. There is something very natural about finding an old journal and saying like, oh, what's in here? And then looking through it and then kind of getting these notes from your past self, which is really a strange experience. But what it does remind me of, this idea of leaving yourself a memento that he does in the movie, is I've also left notes to my future self, specifically with the intention of communicating something I discovered at that moment to my future self that won't be in that state of mind. I'm talking about drugs, but particularly the psychedelic variety. If you're tripping and you kind of have this epiphany and you know that you're in this state of mind and you get it now, but once you leave that state of mind, you may not recall the epiphany. So I've tried to leave notes for myself when I'm tripping, so that when I'm not, I can look back and remember what I discovered.
And has that worked out real well for you?
I was just going to say, the problem is with the actual taking of the notes. That's kind of the hard part, is getting the coherent notes that will actually be able to translate from high person to sober person trying to understand what high person discovered. But there have been some. I still remember one that I wrote to myself. It's the only one I can immediately recall. Bad memory. But it was something about how everything is more beautiful than you notice. Because when you're tripping, you look at things and the sky is more blue, the plants seem more alive, everything just seems more beautiful. And I remember writing, because I was trying to trip and it didn't work, so it was like this very low grade trip, but still enough for me to be like, I need to write a note to myself. And I wrote that to myself to kind of remember that if you really focus on something, you can find that beauty again in it. I don't know if I do it that often, but I do remember the note, so it's interesting. I believe in that. More importantly, though, or maybe not more importantly, but more vividly, I also wrote myself notes from sober self to future tripping self. And these were notes of like, hey, if you're feeling like shit, relax. And I also wrote kind of these questions. It's super weird because you're trying to communicate to a version of yourself that is different. And you can't just, you know that once you change states of mind, that you're not going to hold the thought anymore. It's not like I can, come here and then go over there and be like, oh, let me go write this thing down over there. Once you start tripping, that's it. You forget about what else you were doing before. You're not going to think, oh, that's right, I wanted to think about this thing. You're really not. So I wrote down, there's a few questions for myself of like, so I could remember to kind of consider these things in this different state of mind. That trip didn't work that well, so it wasn't, I looked at the question, I was like, no, I still don't know the answers to these. But it was that same effort of trying to communicate with a different self. Really weird.